Maya sat quietly on one of the cold steel chairs at the crowded airport terminal. Her small nylon bag clutched tightly to her chest. The bag held everything she owned in the world. An old CV she had rewritten 100 times. A file of rough sketches she had drawn on pieces of paper she found on the streets. And a crumpled boarding pass she had guarded like treasure. Her clothes were worn out, her shoes almost falling apart, and her hair roughly packed back into a bun. But despite her ragged appearance, there was a strange glow in her eyes, the glow of hope. She had saved for months. Every single coin she had begged for. Every naira people dropped into her tin while she sat at the roadside. She had refused to eat some days, just so she could put money aside. Finally, she had enough to buy a one-way ticket to Enugu. Maya kept glancing at the big electronic clock on the wall. The time was rushing toward 10 a.m. Her heart pounded. The interview notice had come unexpectedly the day before. A last-minute invitation from one of the biggest architectural firms in Enugu. She had almost cried when she read the email at a cybercafe. It was her first real chance after so many years of rejection. She couldn't miss it. Not now. Not after all she had endured. The boarding call was announced. People stood up, some pulling their designer luggage, others chatting with family on the phone. Maya followed them nervously, holding her small nylon bag like it was made of gold. She joined the line at the gate, trying to stay calm. When she reached the air hostess, the woman's eyes narrowed at her appearance. "Boarding pass?" the hostess asked, raising a perfectly arched brow. Maya handed it over with trembling hands. The hostess looked at the boarding pass, then at Maya's torn sandals, then back at the pass. "Where is your luggage?" This is all I have," Maya whispered, lifting her nylon bag slightly. The hostess frowned. "Madam, are you sure you can afford this flight? Where did you even get this ticket?" "I bought it," Maya said quickly, her voice shaking. "Please, I need to get to Enugu today. I have an interview by noon. Please." But the hostess's face turned cold. She looked Maya up and down with disgust and shook her head. "I'm sorry, but you cannot board this flight. This is not a bus park. We cannot allow just anyone. Please, don't do this to me," Maya begged, her eyes filling with tears. "I worked hard for this ticket. Please." The people in line started staring. Some whispered, some sneered. A man in a suit shook his head and muttered, "These are the kind of people who embarrass themselves." Maya's chest tightened. She felt the world closing in on her. The hostess stepped aside and motioned for security. "Escort this woman out." Maya's knees felt weak. Her chance, her only chance, was slipping away right before her eyes. She wanted to scream, to fight, but the shame weighed her down. Then, just as the security guard moved forward, a deep voice cut through the noise. "Wait!" Everyone turned. From the first-class section of the line, a tall man in an expensive suit walked forward. His presence was commanding, his face sharp yet kind. His wristwatch gleamed, his shoes polished, but it was his calm confidence that silenced the crowd. "What seems to be the problem here?" he asked the hostess, his tone polite but firm. "This woman," the hostess said with a scoff, "claims she has a ticket, but look at her. She can't possibly." "She has a ticket," the man interrupted, taking the boarding pass from Maya's trembling hand and glancing at it. "And it's valid. So what exactly is the problem?" The hostess faltered. "Sir, it's just that she doesn't look like she belongs here," the man finished, his eyes narrowing. The hostess shifted uncomfortably. "Well, yes." A silence fell. Maya stared at the man, her tears threatening to fall. Why was he standing up for her? The man sighed and turned to Maya. "Come with me." But the hostess quickly stepped forward. "Sir, first-class passengers are not allowed to bring." The man cut her off again. "If she cannot board this flight, then neither will I." Gasps filled the air. Everyone knew who he was now. Richard Roberts, billionaire architect, the owner of Roberts and Company, and one of the most powerful men in the country. His face was often on magazine covers, his name constantly in business news. Without another word, Richard pulled out his phone, dialed a number, and said calmly, Prepare the jet. We leave in 30 minutes. The hostess froze. The security guard stepped back. The crowd watched in stunned silence as Richard gently guided Maya away from the gate. Maya could barely breathe. She walked beside him like a shadow, her mind spinning. Private jet? Who was this man? Why would he do this for her? Minutes later, they were seated in a luxurious private jet. Maya sat stiffly, her nylon bag clutched on her lap, afraid to touch anything. The leather seats, the polished tables, the soft hum of the engines. It was all too much. Richard sat across from her, studying her quietly. "So," he said finally, "where are you going in such a hurry?" Maya swallowed hard. "Enugu. I have an interview at noon." "An interview?" Richard leaned forward with interest. "With which firm?" She hesitated, then whispered, "Roberts and Company." Richard raised his brows slightly but said nothing. Instead, he asked, "And what position are you applying for?" "Architect," Maya said, her voice trembling. I studied architecture. I used to design. I still draw. But..." Her words broke, and tears welled up in her eyes. "Life hasn't been kind." Richard's voice softened. "Tell me." And so she told him. She told him about her abusive partner, David, who had once been her whole world. How he grew cold, how he cheated openly, how he threw her out one rainy night when she was pregnant, choosing another woman over her. How she had begged him for mercy, but he slammed the door in her face. How she lost the pregnancy days later because of the stress. With no family, no home, and no money, Maya had been forced onto the streets. She begged to survive, slept under bridges, ate scraps. Yet even there, she clung to her dreams. She drew buildings in the dust, on old papers, on napkins strangers dropped. Her hands never forgot how to create, even when her stomach ached with hunger. As she spoke, tears slid down her cheeks. She wiped them quickly, ashamed. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I don't know why I'm telling you all this." Richard reached across the table and gently took the file from her nylon bag. He opened it and began to look through her sketches. The silence stretched as he turned page after page. His eyes narrowed, his lips pressed together. "These are good," he said finally, lifting his gaze to hers. "Very good." Maya blinked in surprise. You think so?" "I know so," Richard said simply. "I'm an architect too, and I own one of the biggest firms in the country. I know talent when I see it. And you, Maya, you are talented." Maya covered her mouth with her hands, her chest tightening with a mixture of disbelief and hope. For so long, nobody had seen her. Nobody had believed in her. And now, this stranger, this billionaire, was saying the words she had longed to hear. As the jet soared into the clouds, Maya stared out the window, tears streaming down her face. For the first time in years, the world didn't look so dark. For the first time, she dared to believe that maybe, just maybe, her story was not over yet. The jet landed smoothly on the Enugu runway just before 11 a.m. Maya's heart raced as the aircraft slowed down. She couldn't believe she had just traveled on a private jet. The sound of the engines quieted, and soon the door opened to reveal the bright Enugu sunshine. Waiting on the tarmac was a gleaming black limousine. A chauffeur in a crisp suit stood beside it, bowing slightly as Richard and Maya descended the stairs. Maya froze. A limousine? For her? She looked at Richard, but he only smiled gently. "Come on," he said, guiding her forward. Inside, the limo smelled of leather and expensive cologne. Maya sat nervously, holding her nylon bag against her lap even though her sketches now rested in Richard's briefcase. She kept her eyes low, but her mind was racing. She thought of the streets, the hunger, the nights she had prayed under a bridge. Now here she was, sitting in a car most people only saw in movies. Richard broke the silence. "So, where exactly is this interview of yours?" Maya hesitated before replying, her voice soft. "At Roberts and Company." Richard chuckled. A deep, amused laugh that startled her. She looked up quickly. Why are you laughing?" He leaned back against the leather seat, still smiling. Because, Maya, I am Richard Roberts, and Roberts and Company is my firm. Her jaw dropped. What? Yes, he said casually. You're going to be interviewed at my company. Funny how life works, isn't it? Maya's heart thudded wildly. She didn't know whether to laugh or cry. You mean you're the one? Her voice trailed off, too overwhelmed to continue. Richard tilted his head, studying her. Do you know what this means? She shook her head quickly, panic in her eyes. It means I won't get the job. You already know me. The others will think I cheated, that you gave me the position out of pity. Richard smiled at her earnestness. Relax. I'm not going to interfere. You'll go in like every other applicant. You'll face the panel. You'll prove yourself. Whether you get the job or not will depend on you. Not on me. Tears burned behind her eyes. For the first time, someone powerful wasn't trying to use her or buy her. He wanted her to stand on her own. She nodded, her voice barely a whisper. Thank you. Richard glanced at his watch. But first you need a change of clothes. You can't walk into Roberts and Company in these. His eyes flickered to her faded gown and worn sandals. Maya looked down, ashamed. She had tried her best to stay neat, but there was no hiding her poverty. The limousine pulled up in front of a high-end boutique. The glass doors gleamed, and mannequins in elegant suits stood proudly on display. Maya froze. I can't go in there, she said quickly. I don't belong in such a place. Richard gave her a firm look. You belong anywhere your dreams take you. Come. He stepped out first and held the door for her. Reluctantly, Maya followed. Inside, the boutique sparkled. Rows of tailored suits, polished shoes, silk blouses, and handbags lined the shelves. The sales attendants looked up in surprise, their eyes sweeping over Maya's ragged clothes. One of them whispered something to another, and they giggled. Richard's commanding voice cut through the air. Bring me your best corporate wear for women. Now. The attendants scrambled at once. In minutes, Maya stood in a fitting room, staring at her reflection. She wore a sleek black suit, crisp white blouse, and polished heels. Her hair had been brushed neatly, and the suit hugged her figure perfectly. She gasped. Is that really me? Richard appeared behind her in the mirror. Yes, Maya. That's you. The architect, not the beggar. This is who you've always been. Her eyes filled with tears again. For years, she had forgotten what it felt like to look human, to look worthy. Now, for the first time, she felt powerful. They left the boutique, and Richard paid without flinching at the price. Maya wanted to protest, but the words stuck in her throat. Gratitude overwhelmed her. By the time the limousine pulled up at Roberts and Company, it was already close to noon. Maya's hands shook as she stepped out. The building rose tall in the heart of town, glass windows reflecting the sunlight, bold letters spelling out, Roberts and Co. Architects. It was magnificent. People streamed in and out, dressed smartly, carrying files and laptops. Maya's knees trembled. Richard placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. Go in. Face them. Show them who you are. When you're done, come to my office with the verdict. She nodded, inhaled deeply, and walked toward the glass doors. Inside, the receptionist smiled politely. Good morning. How may I help you? Maya swallowed hard. I'm here for the interview. Maya Johnson. The receptionist tapped on her computer, then nodded. Yes, Ms. Johnson. Please have a seat. You'll be called shortly. Maya sat down, her heart pounding. She clutched her file tightly, trying to calm her breathing. Around her, other candidates looked sharp, confident, polished. Some glanced at her and smirked. She lowered her eyes, reminding herself of Richard's words. This is who you've always been. Soon, her name was called. She entered the interview room, where 4 panelists sat behind a long table. Their expressions were serious, their eyes sharp. Good afternoon, Miss Johnson, one of them said. Let's begin. The questions came fast. They asked about her studies, her work experience, her design concepts. They tested her knowledge of structures, sustainability, and modern trends in architecture. At first, Maya's voice trembled, but then something inside her shifted. She remembered the nights she had drawn buildings by candlelight, the afternoons she had sketched while hungry, the years she had dreamed of creating structures that touched lives. Passion filled her words. Confidence replaced fear. When they handed her a sheet of paper and asked her to sketch a quick design for a proposed community center, her hands flew across the page. Lines became walls, walls became halls, halls became dreams. She looked up finally, and the panelists were nodding. One of them whispered to another. Maya left Richard's office that afternoon with her appointment letter clutched in her hand like a prize. She couldn't stop smiling. After years of pain and humiliation, she finally had something no one could take away from her. A job she earned with her own sweat, her own talent. When she stepped into the elevator, she leaned against the wall, breathing deeply. The scent of polished floors, the sight of neatly dressed employees walking with confidence, all of it felt unreal. A week ago, she had been on the street, begging for scraps. Now, she was part of a world she thought she had lost forever. The elevator doors opened on the ground floor, and she spotted Richard waiting for her near the lobby. "How did it go?" he asked, though his smile told her he already knew the answer. "I got it," Maya whispered, still holding back tears. "I really got it." Richard chuckled and gave a small nod. "I knew you would." They walked out together, the late afternoon sun glowing against the glass walls of the firm. As the limousine door opened for them, Richard asked, "Have you made any plans on where you'll stay here in Enugu?" Maya's smile faltered. She looked down at her hands. "No, I don't have anyone here. I thought maybe I'd find a cheap lodge or something small. I don't even know." Richard studied her for a moment, then pulled out his phone. He dialed quickly and spoke in his usual calm but commanding voice. "Yes? Get me a safe, fully furnished bungalow in a decent neighborhood. Something ready for immediate move-in. I'll be there in an hour." Maya's head shot up, her eyes wide. "Richard, no. Please, I can't let you do that. You've already done too much for me." He raised a brow. "Maya, you can't go back to sleeping under bridges, not after all this. You need a safe place. Consider it an investment in your future. Architects need peace of mind to create. You'll pay me back one day, if you must. But for now, let me do this." Her throat tightened. Gratitude burned in her chest, but so did fear. She didn't want to depend on another man again. But the sincerity in his eyes reassured her. Richard wasn't like David. He wasn't trying to control her. He was giving her space to rise. "Thank you," she whispered. The limousine drove them to a quiet neighborhood lined with trees and neat houses. Children rode bicycles down the street, laughter filling the air. A real estate agent was waiting outside a charming bungalow with cream-colored walls and a red roof. "This way, sir, madam," the agent said, smiling politely. Maya stepped inside slowly, her sandals brushing against the tiled floor. The house smelled faintly of fresh paint. The living room was bright, with wide windows letting in golden sunlight. A soft sofa sat in the corner, and a dining table stood ready in the center. She walked through the rooms one by one. A small but cozy kitchen with cabinets, a bedroom with a neat bed already made, a bathroom with gleaming tiles. Her steps grew slower as tears blurred her vision. She turned to Richard, her voice trembling. This is too much. It's beautiful. I don't deserve this." Richard stepped closer, his expression firm. "Maya, don't ever say that again. You deserve safety. You deserve peace. You deserve a place to call home." Her lips trembled, and finally, the tears spilled over. She covered her face with her hands, her body shaking as years of pain poured out. "Thank you," she whispered through sobs. "Thank you, Richard. You've given me back my life." Richard placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. "No, Maya. You took your life back the moment you refused to give up on your dreams. I'm only opening the door. The rest is yours to walk through." The agent, sensing the emotion of the moment, quietly excused himself. "The keys are yours, madam. Congratulations." He handed them over and stepped outside. Maya held the keys tightly in her palm, still crying softly. Richard gave her a small smile. "Come." There's one more thing. Confused, she followed him outside. A sleek, brand new car was parked in the driveway, its silver paint gleaming in the fading sunlight. A car dealer leaned casually against it, waiting. Maya froze. Richard. He walked forward, took the keys from the dealer, and pressed them into her hand. This is yours. You'll need it to get to work. Her mouth fell open. She shook her head wildly. No, no, no. I can't accept this. A house is already too much. But a car? Richard, please. This is too much. Richard chuckled softly. Maya, relax. It's not charity. It's practicality. You have a demanding job now. You can't be struggling with buses and taxis every morning. Consider this part of your new beginning. Maya stared at the shiny car through tear-filled eyes. She had dreamed of owning a car once, back in school, when she and her classmates would talk about the future. But life had stolen those dreams. She had never thought she would stand before her own car one day. She looked at Richard, her voice breaking. Why are you doing all this for me? Richard's expression softened. Because sometimes, life takes everything from people who don't deserve it. And sometimes, someone needs to step in and remind them that they still matter. You matter, Maya. Her knees almost gave way. She leaned against the car, sobbing quietly. I don't know how to thank you. You don't have to, Richard said gently. Just live. Just build. Just be the architect you were born to be. The sun dipped lower, painting the sky with shades of orange and pink. Maya stood there, holding the car keys, the house keys, and her fragile heart. For the first time in years, she wasn't thinking about survival. She was thinking about tomorrow. That night, after Richard left, Maya lay in the bed of her new home. The sheets were soft against her skin. The roof didn't leak. The doors locked. The silence was safe, not threatening. She stared at the ceiling for hours, tears streaming down her cheeks. She whispered into the darkness, God, is this really my life now? Am I really free? She clutched her pillow, her heart swelling with gratitude. For the first time in so long, she dared to believe she wasn't cursed. She dared to believe she could be happy. And somewhere in the city, Richard sat in his study, sipping tea and staring out at the skyline. For reasons he couldn't explain, he felt peace knowing Maya was safe tonight. He had helped countless people in his life, but something about her was different. She wasn't just another good deed. She was something more. Maya's first week at Roberts and Company felt like stepping into another universe. Each morning, she slipped into one of the corporate outfits Richard had insisted she buy, combed her hair neatly, and drove her new car through the buzzing streets of She would park in the company's underground garage, still shocked that she had a spot reserved for her, and then walk into the magnificent glass building with her head held high. Every time she pressed her ID card at the security scanner, a small smile tugged at her lips. The sound of the beep was a reminder. She belonged here now. Her colleagues eyed her curiously at first. They had seen the news. Blogs and gossip pages had already carried the story. Billionaire Richard Roberts saves homeless woman, offers her new life. The headlines painted her as a lucky beggar who had stumbled into fortune. Some whispered behind her back, saying she was Richard's mistress. Others sneered that she would not last a month. But when Maya presented her first architectural proposal at a staff meeting, the whispers died. She stood before the boardroom, her sketches projected on the large screen. Her hands shook at first, but when she began to explain her design, a community library that doubled as a safe space for children, her voice grew stronger. She spoke with passion, describing not just walls and roofs, but light, safety, and hope. She showed how her design allowed sunlight to spill into reading halls, how gardens would surround the building to give children a sense of calm. By the time she finished, the room was silent. Then, slowly, the board members nodded. One of them murmured, "Brilliant." Another said, "Fresh ideas. We need this energy." Even the skeptics had to admit, Maya wasn't just a charity case. She was talented. That evening, as she walked to her car, Richard was waiting by the entrance. "How did it go?" he asked casually, though his eyes gleamed. Maya couldn't hold back her smile. They loved it. I knew they would, Richard said, pride clear in his voice. You were born for this. Over the following weeks, Maya's reputation grew. Newspapers stopped calling her a lucky beggar and began referring to her as the rising star of Roberts and Company. Clients requested her on projects. Employees who had once sneered now approached her for advice. Richard often checked in on her. Some afternoons, he would appear at her office door with takeout bags. You've been in here all day, he would say. Come eat. They would sit together eating jollof rice and fried chicken, laughing at small jokes. On weekends, he invited her to join him at art exhibitions or architectural tours. Maya hesitated at first, worried about gossip, but Richard always reassured her. Let people talk, he said once as they walked through a sculpture garden. You can't stop them. Focus on the life you're building. Maya admired his calmness. He carried himself like a man who had nothing to prove to anyone. Around him, she felt safe. But outside their bubble, shadows were gathering. One evening, as Maya scrolled through her phone after dinner, her heart nearly stopped. A message from an unknown number flashed on her screen. Hello, Maya. It's been a long time. Her fingers trembled. She knew that voice in her head even before she read the next line. It's David. Her stomach turned. She stared at the message, her breath coming in sharp gasps. The man who had destroyed her life, who had abandoned her when she needed him most. Why was he reaching out now? The phone rang. The same unknown number. Against her better judgment, she answered. Maya. David's smooth, familiar voice filled her ear. I've missed you. She froze. What do you want? She asked coldly. Don't be like that, David said lightly. I heard the news. Look at you, all successful now. Living in a fine house, driving cars, working with a billionaire. I'm proud of you, Maya. Really. Her grip on the phone tightened. Don't lie. You're not proud of me. You're after something. David chuckled. Ah, Maya. You know me too well. Of course I'm after something. You're carrying my baby after all. You didn't think you'd enjoy all that luxury alone, did you? Her chest tightened. Her hand flew to her belly instinctively, even though the baby hadn't been born yet. This is my baby. You lost the right to call yourself the father the day you threw me out. Maya, he said softly, almost mockingly. Don't talk like that. I'm coming back into your life, whether you like it or not. She hung up before he could say more, her whole body shaking. That night she couldn't sleep. She sat on the edge of her bed, hugging her knees, replaying his words. She wanted to run, but where would she go? She wanted to scream, but only silence filled the room. The next morning, she told Richard during one of his visits. He called me, she whispered, staring at her hands. David. He says he wants back into my life. Richard's jaw tightened. He leaned forward, his voice steady. What did he say exactly? She repeated the conversation. Richard's eyes darkened. I know men like David. Opportunists. They crawl back when they smell money. Don't let him scare you. I won't let him. Maya wanted to believe him. She nodded, though her heart was still heavy. The next day, as she dressed for work, she opened her door and froze. David was sitting on her front step. Her breath caught. David, how did you find me? He smirked, standing slowly. Did you think you could hide? This is my baby, Maya, my stake in your life. You can't shut me out. She shook her head, anger and fear mixing in her chest. You have no right. You lost that long ago. They argued. David's voice grew louder, demanding. Maya finally pushed past him and got into her car. She refused to let him see her break. But the image of him sitting there haunted her all through the morning meeting. She barely heard her colleagues. She made mistakes in her presentation. People glanced at her strangely. After the meeting, Richard called her into his office. What's wrong? You're not yourself today. She hesitated, then sighed. David. He was at my house this morning. Richard's calm facade cracked. His eyes blazed with fury. He showed up at your home? Yes, Maya whispered. He says he wants the baby. He says he has a right to my life. Richard stood abruptly, grabbing his car keys. I'm driving you home. If he's there, he'll answer to me. Maya followed silently, her heart pounding. For the first time since she had met Richard, she saw him angry. Not the quiet, composed billionaire, but a man ready to fight for her. And deep inside her, beneath the fear, a tiny spark of warmth flickered. Richard drove fast but steady, eyes fixed on the road, jaw clenched. Maya sat beside him, fingers twisting around each other. The city passed in a blur. Street stalls, Okada riders, blinking traffic lights. None of it settled her heart. She kept seeing David on her doorstep, the same smirk she knew too well. When they reached her street, Richard slowed down and scanned both sides of the road. Stay in the car, he said quietly. If he's here, I'll handle it. Maya nodded. But when they pulled up in front of the bungalow, the step was empty. No David. No one lurking behind the shrubs. Only the evening sound of children laughing 2 houses away and a radio playing somewhere down the street. Richard parked and got out first. He checked the compound, the backyard, the side path. Everything was quiet. He came back to the car and opened Maya's door. He's not here. Her shoulders loosened a little, but the fear did not leave. He will come back, she whispered. Richard met her eyes. Then I'll be here when he does. She hesitated. You shouldn't, you're very busy. I can manage. No, he said simply. You don't have to go through this alone. He helped her carry 2 small bags inside. Even though there was nothing heavy in them, she moved slowly. Her due date was near, and some days the baby made her breath short. Richard noticed and guided her to the sofa. I'll make tea, he said, moving toward the kitchen like he had lived here for years. Maya smiled faintly at the sight of him opening cupboards, searching for sugar and cups. He looked out of place in his crisp shirt and expensive watch, but he was careful with everything, gentle with every clink of porcelain. They sat together with warm mugs in their hands. Silence settled, but it was a calm silence, the kind that made the walls feel safe again. Thank you, Maya said, for staying. Richard took a sip and shrugged. You don't have to thank me for common sense. Then softer, you've done so well, Maya. Don't let him steal your peace. They talked for a while about normal things, about the library project, about a client who wanted a rooftop garden, about the small plant Maya had placed by the window and named Hope. The hours drifted. The sky turned dark and the neighborhood quieted. When Maya stood to stretch, a small pain tugged at her lower back. She winced and pressed a hand against it. Are you okay? Richard asked immediately. Yes, she said with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. Just the usual. Let me stay the night, he said. I'll sleep on the couch. If he returns, I'll be here. Maya wanted to protest, but the truth was simple. She felt safe with him there. She nodded. Okay. Richard locked the doors and checked the windows again. He laid a blanket on the couch and insisted she take the bed. She fell asleep listening to the light sound of him moving in the sitting room and the stronger sound of her own heartbeat calming down. The morning came soft and pale. Richard woke before dawn as he usually did. He stood by the window and watched the sky brighten, then moved to the kitchen. He found eggs, bread, a tin of milk, and a few tomatoes. Soon, the house filled with the smell of frying eggs and butter on hot pan. Maya walked in, hair tied back, face still sleepy, and stopped at the doorway. You're cooking. Richard, holding a wooden spoon like it was a technical tool, smiled without turning. Architects can cook breakfast. It's in the training manual. She laughed, surprised both of them. He turned, set 2 plates on the small dining table, and pulled out a chair for her. They ate slowly, like people who had found something normal in the middle of a storm. For a few minutes, Maya forgot David. She forgot fear. She remembered only that she was alive, in a home that did not leak, with someone who did not hurt her. Thank you, she said again when they were done. For this, for everything. Eat more, he replied, sliding an extra toast to her plate. You're eating for 2. The knock came while she was reaching for her cup. 3 loud knocks, sharp, impatient. Maya's hand froze halfway. She looked at Richard. His eyes hardened. He stood and went to the door. When he opened it, David filled the frame like a bad memory that refused to fade. He wore a pressed shirt and dark trousers, like he was going to an office that did not exist. His mouth curved into a smile that never reached his eyes. "If it isn't the charitable billionaire," David said, voice dripping with mock sweetness. "How's your new pet?" "Leave," Richard said quietly. "You're not welcome here." Maya heard his voice and came to the doorway. Her breath caught. "David." He tilted his head. "Ah, the mother of my child." He pointed at her belly. "Remember? That is mine." Maya's hands curled into fists at her sides. "This baby will never know you as her father." David's eyes flashed. "We'll see." He took a step forward, but Richard moved in front of him, blocking the way with calm strength. "Do not come near this house again," Richard said, voice low and even. "If you do, I will have you arrested." David laughed, short and ugly. "Arrest me? For what? For greeting the mother of my child? Be a man. Don't hide behind police and big grammar. Throw me out yourself." He spread his arms, daring. Richard's eyes didn't leave his. "One last warning." David's smile snapped. He looked past Richard and aimed his words like stones at Maya. "You think you're safe? Because you have a rich man cooking eggs in your kitchen? You think all this will last?" He jabbed a finger toward her belly. "That is still my blood." "Leave," Richard repeated. David's gaze cut back to Maya. Anger twisted his mouth. He moved suddenly, brushing past Richard's shoulder and crowding the doorway. "You will regret this." Maya stepped forward and stood tall, even with her fear. "Get out of my house, David." He shoved her. It wasn't a heavy push, but she wasn't steady on her feet. She stumbled backward, her heel catching on the edge of the rug. She fell onto the tiled floor with a soft cry. Everything in Richard's face changed. The restraint left. The training entered. He moved fast, not wild, not messy. Focused. He grabbed David's wrist mid-swing, twisted, and drove him back with 2 clean strikes. One to the shoulder to break balance, one to the ribs to empty breath. David lunged with anger, not skill. Richard sidestepped, hooked a foot behind David's ankle, and swept. David crashed into the doorframe, cursing. He came again, swinging. Richard blocked, stepped in, and drove a short punch into David's chest, pushing him out into the compound. "Enough," Richard said, voice like steel. "Leave. Now." David stared, panting, eyes wide at the power he had not expected. He spat on the ground, his pride bleeding more than his lip. "You haven't seen the last of me." He backed away, then turned and ran, hurling words over his shoulder. "I'll be back." Richard watched him go only long enough to be sure he was truly leaving, then spun around and hurried to Maya. She was half sitting, half lying on the tile, her face pale. One hand held her belly, the other reached for him. "Richard," she whispered, breath shallow. "Something is wrong." He knelt beside her. "Where does it hurt?" "A tight pain. Then it stops. Then it comes again," she said, voice shaking. Another wave seized her and she winced. "It's closer now." Richard's heart jumped. Contractions. Her eyes met his, a small, frightened nod. He didn't waste a second. He grabbed a clean blanket from the couch, wrapped it around her shoulders, and lifted her gently. "We're going to the hospital." He carried her to the car and laid the seat back. "Breathe with me," he said as he fastened the belt across her. "In 2, 3, out, 2, 3. She tried to match him. The next contraction hit and she squeezed his hand hard enough to hurt, but he did not let go. He shut the front door, locked it, and ran around to the driver's side. The engine roared. He drove with precision, fast but careful, hands steady on the wheel, eyes on the road and the side mirror, mind counting distances like drawings on a plan. "You're doing well," he said. "We're almost there. Keep breathing. In 2, 3, out, 2, 3. Maya tried to focus on his voice. The world blurred with pain and fear and then strange calm. Between the waves, She saw his profile, strong and set, and felt her panic ease. He was here. She was not alone. They reached the hospital. Nurses rushed forward with a wheelchair as soon as Richard shouted for help. "She's in labor," he said, already lifting Maya out of the car. "Please, take care of her." The nurses took over, gentle but quick. A midwife asked questions. Maya answered between breaths. Someone placed a cuff on her arm. Someone else checked the baby's heartbeat. The sound filled the room. Fast, strong, steady. Maya began to cry. Relief, fear, hope. All of it at once. "You're okay," the midwife said, smiling. "Your baby is okay. It's time." They wheeled her toward the delivery room. Richard started to follow, then stopped at the nurse's firm hand. "Sir, you can wait outside." He nodded, swallowing the urge to argue. He squeezed Maya's hand before they separated. "I'm here," he said. "I'm right here." The door closed. Time changed shape in the white corridor. Seconds felt like hours. Richard paced, sat, stood, paced again. He wiped blood, David's, from his knuckles with a tissue, then noticed and tossed it away. He scrubbed his hands in the restroom until the sting of soap pulled him back into his body. He sent a message to the head of security at Roberts & Company, short and direct. "I need eyes on a man named David. Full name to follow. Do it quietly." Then he waited. Inside, Maya pushed through pain she could not name. She gripped the bed rail, shook, prayed. The midwife's voice was a rope she could hold. "You are strong," the woman kept saying. "You can do this. One more push. That's it." Again. Maya thought of the street and the nights under the bridge. She thought of the rain that soaked her clothes and the hunger that gnawed her bones. She thought of the day an air hostess had looked at her like dirt, and the moment a stranger's voice had cut through the noise to say, "Wait." She thought of drawings on torn paper and a plant on a windowsill named Hope. She pushed. A cry burst into the room. Fierce, high, perfect. The midwife laughed, full and bright. "A girl." Maya broke into tears that felt like light. The midwife placed a small, warm bundle on her chest. Maya looked down and saw a face, red and wrinkled and beautiful, 2 eyes squeezed tight, a tiny mouth opening to declare her arrival to the world. "Hello?" Maya whispered, voice shaking with joy. "Hello, my love." The baby settled like she knew the voice. A nurse cleaned Maya's forehead and adjusted the blanket. The midwife's hand squeezed her shoulder. "You did well, Mama." Later, when everything was calm and the baby had been checked and wrapped again, a nurse opened the door and signaled. Richard entered quietly, as if stepping into a sacred place. He stopped at the foot of the bed and simply stared. The fight gone from him, the power gone too. Only wonder remained. Maya looked up at him, eyes shining. "Meet our little miracle," she said softly, then laughed at herself. "I mean, my miracle." Richard moved closer, slow, careful. The baby made a small sound like a sigh. He reached out, then paused, seeking permission with his eyes. "Go on," Maya whispered. He slid his hands under the tiny body and lifted her. His face changed again, softened in a way Maya had never seen. He stared at the small fingers, the small mouth, the newness of it all. He smiled, and it was not the smile of a billionaire who had won another deal. It was the smile of a man who had been allowed to hold a sunrise. "She's perfect," he said, barely breathing the words. He handed the baby back reluctantly, then bent and kissed Maya's forehead. The kiss was gentle, grateful, promise made without words. "Thank you for being brave," he whispered. "Thank you for fighting." Maya closed her eyes. For the first time in a very long time, she felt completely safe. The storm had not ended. Storms never really ended. But she had crossed something. A line, a night, a sea. She had entered morning. Outside, the city moved on. Cars honked. Traders called out prices. Life pushed forward. Inside the bright room, a new life breathed softly against her chest. And a man who had once been a stranger stood watch like a lighthouse. Whatever waited beyond this day, whatever David still planned, whatever fear still tried to rise, Maya knew one thing. She was not the same woman who had sat on a cold airport chair, clutching a nylon bag. She was a mother. She was an architect. She was alive. And she was not alone. The days after the birth felt like a dream wrapped in fragile paper. Maya returned home from the hospital with her daughter in her arms. Richard beside her every step. The little girl was tiny, her cry soft, her eyes still adjusting to the brightness of the world. Maya named her Amara, Grace, because the child was nothing short of grace made flesh. When they carried Amara into the bungalow for the first time, Maya stood in the living room and whispered, "Welcome home, my baby." Tears rolled down her cheeks as she kissed the child's forehead. Richard stayed close, helping to unpack, checking the locks on the doors again, making sure the windows were secure. "Everything has to be safe," he muttered more than once, as if repeating it would make it so. In the following days, he visited almost every evening. He brought food, sometimes cooked by him, sometimes from fancy restaurants. He held the baby gently, never rushing, always asking permission with his eyes before taking her into his arms. When Amara fussed, he rocked her slowly, murmuring to her in low tones that always seemed to calm her down. Maya often stood in the doorway and watched them, her chest tightening with emotions she couldn't name. Gratitude, relief, maybe something deeper. One evening, as the three of them sat at the dining table, Maya laughed for the first time since she could remember. She had tried to help Richard cook, insisting she could manage even though she was still healing, and he had teased her about nearly burning the stew. For a moment it felt like family, but shadows are never far from light. The seventh night after returning home began peacefully. Maya had bathed Amara, dressed her in a soft onesie, and laid her in the crib by the bed. Richard had left an hour earlier, promising to come back in the morning with supplies. The house was quiet. A fan hummed softly. Outside, crickets sang. Maya drifted to sleep, exhaustion wrapping around her. She did not hear the soft scrape of a window being pried open. She did not hear the cautious steps across the tiled floor. She did not see the shadowed figure that moved with purpose toward the crib. Only when the night silence grew strange did she stir. She turned on the bed and reached instinctively toward the crib, empty. Her heart slammed against her chest. Her eyes flew open. "Amara?" she whispered. She sat up quickly, fumbling for the light switch. The crib was bare. Her scream tore through the house. "My baby! Amara! No!" She stumbled to the living room, then the kitchen, calling her baby's name as if the child could answer. Every room echoed with emptiness. The window in the sitting room was ajar, the curtain fluttering. Her legs gave way. She fell to the floor, sobbing, clutching her chest. The world tilted. Through her tears, she managed to grab her phone. Her fingers shook so violently she could barely press the numbers. She called the one person she trusted. "Richard," she cried when he answered. "She's gone. They took my baby. I'm on my way," he said, no questions asked, his voice sharp with urgency. Minutes felt like hours. Maya paced the house, screaming, praying, collapsing in tears, rising again. When Richard finally burst through the door, she ran to him like a drowning woman clutching a lifeline. "They took her," she gasped, clutching his shirt. The crib was empty. The window was open. "Richard, they took Amara." He pulled her close, steadying her. "We'll find her," he said firmly. "I promise you we'll find her." He called someone immediately, a police inspector he clearly knew well. Within an hour, officers arrived, their uniforms dark against the night. They asked questions gently, their notebooks open. Maya tried to answer, but her voice cracked. "When did you last see the baby?" "Just before I slept," she whispered. "She was in the crib." "Did you hear anything? Notice anyone?" "No, no." She broke down again, her whole body trembling. "It's my fault. I should have stayed awake. I should have." "Maya, stop," Richard cut in, his voice calm but firm. He held her shoulders, forcing her to look at him. "This is not your fault. Do you hear me? This is not your fault." The inspector nodded. "We will do everything within our power to find your baby." For now, try to remember the smallest detail. Anything unusual today? Maya closed her eyes, thinking. Then it came to her. David. Richard's jaw clenched. It could be him, she whispered. He said he would be back. He said the baby was his. Richard turned to the inspector. Then start with him. The investigation moved quickly. By evening the next day, the inspector called Richard. A street camera near Maya's neighborhood had captured David, cradling a baby in his arms, heading toward downtown. Maya nearly collapsed when she heard. It's him, she whispered, clutching her stomach as if she could still feel the child there. That same night, Maya's phone rang. The caller ID was unknown. Her hands shook as she answered. Maya. David's voice slid into her ear, oily and smug. If you want to see the baby again, you'll pay. Her breath caught. David, please. $10 million. He interrupted coldly. Or you'll never see her again. Tears streamed down her face. I don't have that kind of money. You don't, he said, chuckling. But your billionaire does. Tell him to bring it. Or say goodbye to your daughter. The line went dead. Maya dropped the phone, her sobs filling the room. Richard was beside her in an instant, pulling her into his arms. Shoo, we'll get her back. They'll hurt her, Maya choked out. He'll hurt her. Richard cupped her face, his voice steady. Listen to me. He won't. The police are already tracking his call. We'll find him. We'll get Amara back. The inspector nodded from across the room. His team had already set up equipment, their laptops glowing. We're on him. We'll trace every call, every signal. He won't escape. But Richard saw the fear in Maya's eyes, and deep inside, his own anger burned like fire. He had built skyscrapers, negotiated million-dollar deals, and outsmarted competitors his whole career. But nothing had ever felt as urgent, as personal as this. David had touched what he shouldn't have, and Richard would not rest until Amara was safe in Maya's arms again. That night stretched endlessly. Maya sat on the sofa, clutching Amara's small blanket to her chest, inhaling the fading baby scent. Richard stayed beside her, never leaving, answering every call from the police with sharp questions. You're not sleeping? Maya whispered once, looking at him through swollen eyes. I will sleep when Amara is home, he replied simply. She pressed her face into the blanket and wept again. Outside, the night deepened. Somewhere in the city, her baby cried for her mother, and Maya vowed through her tears. No matter what it cost, she would fight until her child was safe again. The hours after David's ransom call felt like walking through a storm with no umbrella. Maya sat in her living room, her arms wrapped around Amara's blanket, rocking back and forth as if motion alone could bring her child back. Richard never left her side, his phone glued to his hand, his eyes sharp and restless. The police inspector and 2 officers worked quietly in the background, their laptops open, radios crackling now and then. Every tick of the clock stabbed deeper into Maya's heart. When the inspector's phone finally rang, the room went silent. He answered quickly, listened, then swore under his breath. We traced the call to an alley downtown, but when we got there, the phone was in a dumpster. He knew we were tracking him. Maya's chest tightened. No, please. Richard stepped forward. What else did you find? The inspector held up a plastic bag. Inside it, a crumpled note. He read aloud, Get my 10 million. Maya buried her face in her hands. He's playing games with us. Richard's voice hardened. He wants to break her spirit. He won't succeed. 2 hours later, another call came. This time David had slipped. He had used his own card to book a motel room on the outskirts of the city. The police didn't waste a second. We move now, the inspector ordered. Richard grabbed his jacket. We're coming too. Maya's first instinct was to say no, but she couldn't sit at home while strangers went after her child. I'm coming, she said firmly. The convoy of police cars and Richard's SUV cut through the night, sirens muted but lights flashing. The city blurred past. Shuttered shops, sleeping houses, a few night owls walking aimlessly under yellow street lamps. Maya sat in the back seat, clutching the baby blanket, whispering prayers under her breath. Please, God, please let her be alive. Please let me hold her again. The motel appeared at last. A rundown building with flickering neon lights, the kind of place no one wanted to admit they visited. Officers surrounded it silently, guns drawn. The inspector gave hand signals. 2 officers slipped in through the back while others prepared to storm the front. Richard squeezed Maya's hand. Stay here. She nodded, her chest heaving. Then the inspector signaled. The door burst open. Shouts filled the air. Police! Hands up! Maya strained to see through the windshield. Moments later, 2 officers dragged David out in handcuffs. His shirt was half-buttoned, his hair messy, his mouth twisted in a bitter smile. You'll never find her, he shouted, laughing madly. You'll never see that child again. Maya's heart dropped. She stumbled out of the car, her knees weak. Where is she, David? Where's my baby? He sneered. Wouldn't you like to know? The inspector slammed him against the hood of a car. Where's the baby? Answer. But David only laughed harder. You can beat me, lock me, kill me. You'll never find her. She's gone. Maya collapsed against Richard's chest, sobbing. Richard held her tightly, his eyes burning with fury. You monster, he muttered under his breath. The police searched every inch of the motel. Under the beds, in the cupboards, even in the basement. But Amara was nowhere. The inspector shook his head grimly. He handed her off. He's not working alone. At the station, David sat in an interrogation room, smirking. Maya watched him through the glass, trembling with rage and fear. He's enjoying this, she whispered. Richard's hand rested on her back. He won't win. Hours dragged by with no progress. Then, just as dawn painted the horizon gray, Maya's phone rang. She picked it up with shaking hands. A woman's voice, soft but urgent, spoke. Maya. Yes, this is Maya. Who are you? Where is my baby? I have her, the woman said, her voice breaking. I'm David's friend. He left the baby with me. But I can't do this. I'm a mother too. I can't stand by while he tears another woman apart. Please come. Take your child. Maya's knees nearly gave way. Where are you? The woman gave an address, a small flat across town. Richard was already on his feet, signaling the inspector. We move. Now. The drive felt endless, though it was less than 30 minutes. When they arrived, a tired-looking young woman opened the door. Her eyes were swollen from crying, her hands trembling. She's inside, she whispered. Maya rushed past her into the living room and froze. There, in a small cot, lay Amara, sleeping peacefully, her tiny chest rising and falling, her fist curled against her cheek. A sound burst from Maya's chest, half sob, half laugh. She ran forward and scooped her daughter into her arms, pressing kiss after kiss onto her face. My baby, my baby, my baby. Tears streamed down her cheeks as Amara stirred, yawned, and began to cry softly. Maya held her close, rocking her, whispering, It's okay now. Mommy's here. You're safe. Richard stood in the doorway, his eyes wet, watching them. His chest loosened for the first time since that terrible night. The young woman wrung her hands, her voice low. I didn't know he would go this far. I thought he was just angry. But when he brought the baby, I knew it was wrong. I'm sorry, Maya. Please believe me. I never wanted to hurt you. Maya, still clutching Amara, looked at her through tears. You did the right thing. That's what matters. The inspector nodded firmly. You'll testify against him? The woman nodded. Yes, he deserves to pay. Back at the station, David's smirk finally cracked when he learned Amara was safe. He roared with rage, cursing the woman who had betrayed him. But his fury only sealed his fate. The inspector had all the evidence he needed. Within days, David was charged with kidnapping, extortion, and assault. Maya sat in the courtroom weeks later, Amara cradled in her arms, Richard at her side. She listened as the judge declared, David Okoro, you are hereby sentenced to 15 years in prison. The gavel struck. Maya exhaled a breath she felt she had been holding since the night her baby was taken. She looked at Richard, and he looked back with a small smile, steady and warm. The evening after the sentencing, Maya stood on her porch, the cool breeze brushing against her face. Amara slept inside, her soft breaths audible through the baby monitor Richard had insisted on buying. Richard joined her, holding 2 mugs of tea. He handed her one. "It's over now," he said softly. She nodded. "Yes, at least for now." They stood in silence, sipping, watching the streetlights flicker on. After a while, Richard turned to her. "Maya, I don't want you to go through this alone anymore. Move in with me. My house is safer, and I can protect both of you better there." Her eyes widened. "Richard," he raised a hand gently. "No pressure, but think about it. You and Amara deserve peace, and I'd like to give you that." Maya's throat tightened. She looked at the man who had rescued her from an airport humiliation, who had fought for her, who had held her baby like she was his own. Maybe fate had been cruel once, but maybe, just maybe, it had given her a second chance in the shape of this man. She didn't answer yet, but she didn't say no. Inside the house, Amara stirred, letting out a soft cry. Maya excused herself and went to pick her up. She pressed her daughter to her chest and whispered, "You're safe now, my love. Mommy's here, and we're going to be okay." And for the first time, she truly believed it. The day after David's sentencing, peace returned to Maya's home for the first time in months. The air felt lighter, as though the house itself could breathe again. Amara slept soundly in her crib, unaware of the battles her mother had fought to keep her safe. That evening, Richard stopped by as he always did. He carried a small bag of groceries in one hand and a bouquet of fresh flowers in the other. "For you," he said, handing her the flowers with a small smile. Maya took them, her cheeks warming. "You didn't have to." "I wanted to," he replied simply. After dinner, when Amara had been fed and tucked in, they stepped out onto the porch. The night was clear, the stars scattered like diamonds across the velvet sky. The street was quiet except for the distant sound of crickets. They stood side by side, silent for a while, gazing upward. Maya folded her arms against the chill of the evening breeze, and Richard noticed. Without a word, he shrugged off his jacket and draped it over her shoulders. "Thank you," she whispered, pulling it tighter. He nodded, his eyes still on the stars. "Beautiful night." "Yes," she said softly, though her gaze had shifted to him. The silence stretched, not awkward but full of something unspoken. Maya felt her heart racing in her chest. For weeks she had leaned on Richard, for strength, for safety, for comfort. But tonight, standing under the stars, she realized how much more he had become to her. He was not just her protector, not just her benefactor. He was the man who had seen her worth when the world had called her worthless. When Richard finally turned his head, their eyes met. He didn't speak. He simply stepped a little closer, his hand brushing hers. The warmth of his touch sent a shiver through her. "Maya," he said quietly, "I don't want to rush you, but I need you to know. I care for you. Deeply." Her breath caught. The words she had been afraid to admit even to herself suddenly filled the air between them. She took a small step closer, her eyes searching his. "I care for you too, Richard," she whispered. The world seemed to pause. Slowly, gently, he leaned in. Maya's heart thundered as she closed her eyes, and then his lips met hers. The kiss was soft, unhurried, yet it carried all the emotions they had both held back. Gratitude, admiration, longing, and a promise of something new. When they pulled back, Maya's eyes glistened with unshed tears. "That was perfect," Richard finished for her, smiling. She nodded, her heart full. Months passed, and their bond only grew stronger. Richard spent more time at the bungalow, though eventually Maya agreed to move into his larger, more secure home. There, Amara had a nursery filled with warmth and color, and Maya had space to breathe and create. Together, they balanced work and home. They cooked meals side by side, argued playfully over designs, and spent quiet evenings walking in the garden. Richard adored Amara, often cradling her to sleep when Maya was too tired, or making silly faces just to hear her laugh. It wasn't long before whispers in the office grew louder. The boss and the new architect. But Maya didn't care anymore. For once in her life, she was happy, and nothing could take that away. One evening, nearly a year after their first meeting at the airport, Richard invited Maya to a private dinner at the rooftop of one of his newest buildings. The view of the city stretched endlessly, the lights twinkling like stars fallen to earth. A violinist played softly in the corner, and the table was lit by candles. Maya, dressed in an elegant gown Richard had picked for her, felt like she was living in a dream. Halfway through the evening, Richard stood. He walked to her side, knelt on one knee, and opened a small velvet box. Inside, a diamond ring sparkled like the very stars they had kissed beneath. "Maya Johnson," he said, his voice steady though his eyes glowed with emotion. "You walked into my life when I least expected it. You reminded me of why I fell in love with architecture, because it's about building something lasting, something beautiful. I want to build forever with you. Will you marry me?" Maya gasped, her hands flying to her mouth. Tears spilled over her cheeks as she nodded quickly. "Yes, yes, Richard. I will." The violinist's music swelled as Richard slipped the ring onto her finger. She pulled him up and kissed him, the city lights blazing around them. Their wedding was small but elegant. Close friends, colleagues, and family filled the hall. Maya wore a simple white gown that flowed like water, her hair pinned back, her smile radiant. Richard, in a tailored suit, couldn't take his eyes off her. When the vows were spoken, Maya's voice trembled. "From the day you saw me at the airport, you have been my miracle. You gave me hope, you gave me love, and you gave me a family. I promise to love you with all that I am, for all of my days." Richard's eyes glistened as he replied, "You walked into my life with nothing but your courage and your dreams. And in you, I found everything I had ever wanted. I promise to protect you, to cherish you, and to walk beside you always." They sealed their vows with a kiss, this one deeper, fuller, carrying all the storms they had survived together. And as the guests clapped and cheered, Maya looked down at her ring, then at the baby sleeping in her mother's arms, and finally at Richard's smiling face. For the first time in her life, she wasn't just surviving. She was living loved, secure, and free. It was truly the perfect beginning. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this story, please subscribe to this channel and tell us where you are watching from. Have a wonderful day.
The storm howled over the private runway, rain slicing sideways across the glowing tarmac. A Gulfstream G650 gleamed under the floodlights, its engines humming like a predator waiting to take off. Emily Carter stood on the slick concrete, one hand bracing her swollen belly, the other clutching the sleeve of her husband Andrew. "Please don't leave me like this," she whispered, voice trembling. Her eyes begged for mercy. Andrew's jaw tightened, irritation etched in every line of his face. "You're dragging me down, Emily. I have a life waiting, one you'll never fit into." At his side, Vanessa Hill smirked, her red lips curling in triumph. She looped her manicured hand around Andrew's arm as if staking her claim. The downpour thickened. Emily slipped, knees buckling, but when she clutched at Andrew's arm for balance, he shoved her. It wasn't a stumble, it was deliberate. Her body hit the ground with a sickening thud, the impact jolting through her womb. Pain exploded across her abdomen. Gasps erupted from nearby staff and passengers sheltered under umbrellas. Someone shouted for security. Emily pressed a trembling palm to her stomach. Warmth spread against her hand. Blood. A cry caught in her throat. She looked up through blurred vision, searching her husband's face for remorse. There was none. Only impatience. "Get up," Andrew barked, pulling Vanessa closer as though Emily's suffering was an inconvenience. "You're embarrassing me." The crowd buzzed in disbelief, phones rising, flashes sparking. Vanessa leaned into Andrew's ear, her whisper cutting through the storm. "She's nothing but baggage." Emily's head spun, her body weakening. She curled forward protectively over her unborn child. Her world felt as if it was shattering. Then, footsteps. Firm, purposeful, unhesitant, a tall man emerged from the shadows of the terminal, rain plastering his dark hair to his forehead, his tailored coat heavy with water. Ethan Blackwell, the billionaire no one expected to see outside boardrooms and news headlines, was suddenly there, kneeling beside Emily. His voice was steady, commanding. "She's with me," he told the stunned onlookers. His eyes met Andrew's with a steel that silenced the jeers. "This woman is my wife, and if anyone lays another hand on her, they'll answer to me." The declaration cracked through the storm like thunder. Emily's dazed eyes widened. She tried to protest, but her lips could barely form words. Ethan slipped his arm under her shoulders, shielding her from the rain with his body. "You're safe now," he whispered low enough for only her to hear. Andrew's face blanched, rage and disbelief colliding. "She's mine," he snapped, voice nearly drowned by the roar of the jet engines. But Ethan only tightened his grip, lifting Emily gently but firmly. His gaze never wavered. Not anymore. The crowd erupted, some with cheers, others with gasps. Vanessa's smirk faltered. Cameras flashed faster, capturing the moment that would ignite headlines across the world. Emily clung weakly to Ethan's chest, her breath ragged, vision fading. The siren of an approaching ambulance wailed closer, and then a sharp contraction ripped through her body, tearing a scream from her lips. The storm outside was nothing compared to the storm inside her. Was her baby coming tonight? Long before the storm at the airport, Emily Carter had lived a life so ordinary that no one could have predicted her fate. She was born in a quiet suburb outside Seattle, the daughter of a school librarian and a mechanic. Her parents taught her that dignity came from kindness and that strength often wore the face of silence. Emily grew up with secondhand clothes, home-cooked meals, and dreams that stretched far beyond the horizon of her small town. She excelled in literature, drawn to stories where heroines endured trials and rose stronger. College was a distant hope, yet she worked nights at a diner, saving every tip in a worn envelope. At 20, she earned a scholarship to study English education, the first in her family to step into a university classroom. That was where she met Andrew Carter. He wasn't wealthy then. He was a rising corporate salesman with a sharp smile, a polished suit, and promises that dazzled like glass under sunlight. Andrew swept her into a whirlwind of late-night drives, flowers left at her dorm door, and declarations of eternal love whispered under starlit skies. To Emily, who had known only modest affection, he seemed like the man she had prayed for. When Andrew proposed after a year, Emily's friends warned her he was ambitious to a fault. But she believed love could soften edges, and she said yes. Their wedding was simple, just family, a borrowed gown, and a rented hall strung with fairy lights. She thought she was stepping into a forever story. At first, their marriage was sweet. They lived in a tiny apartment where Emily cooked casseroles, graded papers, and waited for Andrew to return from work. He would come home with stories of deals closed and clients won, always talking about the future they were building. She believed him. She trusted him. When Emily discovered she was pregnant, she was terrified but hopeful. She imagined late nights rocking her baby to sleep, Andrew's hand steady on her shoulder, the three of them a little team against the world. For a brief moment, Andrew seemed thrilled. He talked about cribs and names, even kissed her belly as if he meant it. But ambition has sharp teeth. As the months passed, Andrew grew restless. He complained about bills, mocked her for working too little, and scoffed at the changes pregnancy brought to her body. His words, once tender, turned cutting. He spent more nights working late, returning home with cologne that wasn't hers lingering on his suit. Emily tried to ignore the whispers. She told herself stress had poisoned his spirit, and that the man she loved was still buried inside him. But deep down, she felt the ground shift beneath her feet. She was no longer his partner. She was his burden. Still, she held on. For the baby, for the vows, for the memory of who he once was. Her parents had taught her loyalty was sacred, and she clung to that lesson, even as Andrew drifted further away. The breaking point came when Vanessa appeared, a woman younger, hungrier, unashamed of her role as Andrew's mistress. Emily felt the knife twist, but she swallowed the pain. She carried her child, taught her classes, and prayed that love might still redeem him. She never imagined redemption would arrive, not from her husband, but from a stranger whose footsteps would one day thunder across a stormy runway. That stranger's name was Ethan Blackwell. Andrew Carter was not born into wealth. He grew up in a cramped apartment above a liquor store, the son of a bitter father who gambled away every paycheck, and a mother who worked 2 jobs just to keep the lights on. From the start, Andrew vowed he would never be trapped in poverty again. He despised the smell of cheap beer, the sound of overdue bills being slammed on the table, and the humiliation of wearing secondhand sneakers that squeaked with every step. Ambition burned inside him like fire. In school, he was the boy who cut corners, but somehow charmed his way into passing grades. He wasn't the smartest, but he was persuasive. He could sell a failing project as genius and convince teachers to give him another chance. That knack for manipulation became his greatest weapon. After college, Andrew landed a sales job at a mid-sized tech firm. He worked long hours, not because of passion, but because he craved power. He learned how to flatter bosses, how to steal credit for others' ideas, how to make himself look indispensable. By 28, he had secured a promotion into management, and with it, a salary that gave him a taste of the life he'd always wanted. Emily had been his anchor during those early years. Her warmth softened the edges of his ambition. But as Andrew's income grew, so did his arrogance. The modest apartment no longer satisfied him. He wanted penthouses, tailored suits, luxury cars with leather interiors that smelled like conquest. Emily's casseroles and kind words began to feel small against the glitter of his new world. At corporate parties, Andrew flourished. He shook hands with executives, laughed too loudly at their jokes, and always had a glass of champagne in hand. The higher he climbed, the more he looked at Emily with disdain. She was still the teacher with ink-stained hands and simple clothes. She didn't fit the glossy picture he was painting for himself. The final shift came the day he met Vanessa Hill. She was an ambitious junior associate at his company, young, stylish, and hungry for advancement. Where Emily saw Andrew's flaws, Vanessa fed his ego. She told him he was brilliant, destined for greatness. She became the mirror that reflected the man he wanted to believe he was. It started with lunches, then late-night meetings, and soon an affair. Emily, carrying his child, was pushed further into the shadows, while Vanessa became his glittering secret. But Andrew wasn't ashamed. He paraded Vanessa at exclusive clubs, whispered promises into her ear, and told himself he deserved it. After all, he had clawed his way up from nothing. Didn't he earn the right to enjoy everything life could offer? The arrogance grew dangerous. He gambled company funds, bribed clients with lavish gifts, and lied to investors. Each risk made him bolder. Each win convinced him he was untouchable. He looked at Emily not as a wife, but as a reminder of the small, weak life he wanted to erase. By the time Emily begged him at the airport, Andrew had already rewritten his story. In his mind, she wasn't a partner. She was an anchor dragging him down. And anchors, he believed, were meant to be cut loose. But fate has a way of humbling men who mistake cruelty for strength. Andrew was about to learn that his greatest downfall would come not from enemies, but from the woman he betrayed. The night of the airport storm was not an accident. Andrew had orchestrated it with precision, determined to make a statement to both Emily and the world. His Gulfstream G650 was waiting on the runway, polished to a mirror sheen, the ultimate symbol of the success he craved. Vanessa clung to his arm, draped in a designer trench coat that glistened in the rain, every bit the mistress who believed she had already won. Emily stood by the terminal doors, her coat thin against the cold wind, one hand over her belly, the other clutching the edge of her small purse. Her face was pale, exhaustion weighing on her features, but her eyes held a glimmer of desperate hope. She thought perhaps she could reason with him, remind him of the life growing inside her. "Andrew, please," she called out, her voice breaking as she stumbled forward across the slick pavement. "I'm your wife. I'm carrying your child. Don't leave me like this." Andrew's stride didn't falter. His eyes, once filled with warmth when they looked at her, now held only disdain. "You're nothing but dead weight, Emily," he snapped, pulling Vanessa closer. "I have a future, and you're not part of it." The small crowd of staff and security froze. Their eyes darted between the glamorous couple and the broken wife chasing after them. Rain poured harder, streaking mascara down Emily's cheeks as she reached him, grabbing his arm for balance. That was when Andrew shoved her. The push wasn't gentle, wasn't a slip of temper. It was deliberate. Emily's body hit the ground with a sickening force. She gasped, a sharp cry tearing from her throat as pain radiated through her abdomen. Her hand flew to her stomach, and when she pulled it back, crimson stained her palm. The color glowed under the harsh runway lights, shocking the onlookers into silence. "Andrew," she screamed, voice echoing across the runway. But her husband only shook his head, face twisted in disgust. "You should have stayed home," he spat. "Now look at you. Pathetic." Vanessa smirked, her eyes flicking down at Emily with cold amusement. "Let her rot," she whispered into Andrew's ear, loud enough for Emily to hear. Phones lifted. Cameras flashed. Within seconds, the scene was captured. The powerful businessman abandoning his pregnant wife in the rain while clinging to his mistress. Gasps rippled through the crowd, whispers spreading like wildfire. Emily tried to stand, but another wave of pain crushed her strength. Her knees buckled, and she collapsed again, sobbing. "The baby," she whispered, voice barely audible. And then through the storm came footsteps. Not hurried, but firm, deliberate, cutting through the chaos like a blade. A man emerged from the shadows of the terminal, his figure tall and commanding. The storm seemed to pause around him. It was Ethan Blackwell, the billionaire no one expected to see there. His eyes locked on Emily, then flicked to Andrew with a sharpness that could slice steel. "You've done enough," Ethan said, his voice calm yet thunderous. He stepped between Emily and Andrew, kneeling beside her. Rain soaked his coat, but he didn't care. He lifted her gently into his arms, shielding her trembling body from the downpour. Then, loud enough for everyone to hear, Ethan declared, "This woman is my wife, and I will protect her with everything I have." The crowd gasped, Andrew's face drained of color, cameras flashed wildly, and Emily, clinging to consciousness, realized the world had just witnessed the moment her life, and Andrew's empire, began to unravel. The ambulance tore through the flooded streets, siren wailing like a wounded animal. Inside, the fluorescent lights flickered against Emily's pale skin. She lay strapped to the stretcher, her breaths coming in short, ragged gasps. Every contraction hit like a wave crashing against a fragile shore. Her trembling hands clutched at Ethan's sleeve, as though his presence alone tethered her to life. "Please, my baby," she whispered, her voice breaking. Tears streamed down her cheeks, mixing with the rain still clinging to her hair. "Don't let anything happen to my baby." Ethan leaned close, his tone steady even as fear carved lines across his face. "You're safe. Both of you are safe. I promise." He pressed her hand firmly against his chest so she could feel his heartbeat, strong and unwavering. "Hold on, Emily, I'm not going anywhere." The paramedics exchanged glances. "She's dilating too fast," one muttered. "This baby's coming tonight whether we're ready or not." Emily's sobs deepened. She had dreamt of a quiet hospital room, Andrew by her side, whispering comfort as she brought their child into the world. Instead, her husband had left her bleeding on the pavement. The man she once trusted had chosen another woman over his unborn child. The stretcher jolted as the ambulance swerved. Emily cried out, arching against the straps. "Why, Andrew?" she gasped. "Why wasn't I enough?" Ethan tightened his grip on her hand. His eyes softened, full of something fierce and protective. "Don't waste another breath on him. He doesn't deserve it. You and your child are what matters now." By the time they burst into the emergency ward, chaos erupted. Doctors and nurses rushed to meet them, wheeling Emily down stark hallways that smelled of antiseptic and desperation. "Severe abdominal trauma, possible placental abruption," one doctor shouted. "We need a delivery room prepped, now." Emily's panic sharpened. Her cries filled the sterile space. "Please save my baby," she pleaded, her voice raw and desperate. "Don't let him die because of me." The nurses pressed oxygen over her mouth, but her wide, terrified eyes stayed fixed on Ethan. She tried to lift her hand toward him, and he caught it instantly. "I'm right here," he assured her, walking alongside the stretcher, even as orderlies tried to push him back. His presence became her anchor. "You're not alone, Emily. Do you hear me? Not anymore." The doors swung open to the delivery room. Machines beeped, gloves snapped, orders flew like bullets in the air. Emily screamed again, clutching Ethan's hand until her knuckles turned white. She wasn't just fighting for herself. She was fighting for the life inside her, the one pure thing Andrew had tried to discard. Her chest heaved as another contraction ripped through her. "Tell me. He'll live," she begged the doctor, sobbing so hard her voice cracked. "Please." Tell me my baby will live." The doctor glanced at Ethan, then back at Emily. "We'll do everything we can." Ethan leaned close, his voice steady as stone. "He's going to live, Emily, and so are you. I won't let go of either of you." And as the monitors screamed and Emily's body convulsed with the fight of her life, the storm outside pounded harder, echoing the storm raging inside her fragile heart. While Emily's cries echoed through the sterile hospital ward, Andrew Carter was raising a glass of champagne in a penthouse suite overlooking the storm-drenched city. He leaned back in a leather chair, his tuxedo jacket tossed aside, his tie loosened. Vanessa Hill lounged across from him, curled like a cat on the velvet sofa, her red dress clinging to every curve. "To new beginnings," she purred, clinking her glass against his. The crystal rang out, mocking in its cheer. Andrew smirked, draining his drink in one swallow. "To freedom," he corrected. "No more whining about bills, no more dragging weight around. Emily was holding me back. Now I can focus on the life I deserve." Vanessa tilted her head, her eyes glinting. "And what about the baby?" Andrew waved a dismissive hand, pouring another glass. "Dead weight too. That kid was never part of the plan. I didn't fight my way up from nothing to get stuck with diapers and midnight feedings. She'll figure it out, or she won't. Either way, not my problem." Vanessa laughed softly, though there was an edge to it. "Cold, Andrew? Even for you." He leaned forward, setting his glass down with a sharp clink. "You think I care what people say? I've spent my whole life clawing out of the gutter. Now I've got money, power, connections. Emily was just a shadow of who I used to be. You?" His hand slid along Vanessa's thigh. "You're my future." Vanessa arched a brow but didn't pull away. She had played the game long enough to know what Andrew really meant. She was his accessory, proof that he could upgrade his life. And for now, that suited her. Lightning flashed across the skyline, illuminating the smug curve of Andrew's mouth. He was already envisioning the headlines he wanted. Carter Enterprises expands global reach. He imagined himself photographed on yachts, at galas, at boardrooms, Vanessa on his arm, Emily erased from existence. But beneath the thunder, a different storm was brewing. Already, whispers of the airport incident were spreading online. Passengers and staff had caught the shove on their phones, posting grainy videos of a pregnant woman crumpling onto wet pavement. The images were blurry, but the cruelty was unmistakable. By dawn, those clips would ignite across social media, Andrew's face branded with shame he hadn't yet felt. For now, though, he reveled in ignorance. Vanessa poured more champagne, curling into his side. "So what's next?" she asked. "Now that you've cut her loose." Andrew chuckled, his tone dripping with arrogance. "What's next? I rise higher than anyone thought possible. By the time Emily even figures out how to stand on her feet, I'll be untouchable." Vanessa leaned into him, but her eyes darted toward the rain-lashed windows. She had seen powerful men fall before, and something in the way Andrew dismissed Emily unsettled her. A woman cast aside with nothing left to lose could be more dangerous than 1,000 rivals. But Andrew Carter didn't notice the flicker of doubt on his mistress's face. He lifted his glass once more, savoring the taste of his imagined victory. What he didn't know was that at that very moment, Emily was fighting for her life, and the world was about to turn against him. The delivery room blazed with urgency, every corner humming with controlled chaos. Bright lights flooded the space, casting harsh shadows across the faces of doctors and nurses as they moved with sharp precision. Emily lay on the bed, her hospital gown clinging to her with sweat and fear. Her hair stuck to her forehead in damp strands, her knuckles white as she clutched Ethan's hand like it was the only thing anchoring her to the earth. Her voice cracked between contractions. "Please, don't let me lose him." Ethan bent closer, his forehead nearly touching hers. His voice, low and steady, drowned out the clamor of medical orders around them. "You won't. You hear me, Emily? You're stronger than this storm. Your son is stronger too." The monitor beeped in erratic bursts. One of the nurses glanced at the screen, her lips tightening. "Fetal heart rate dropping," she announced. The doctor immediately barked orders. "We need to move fast. Prep for emergency delivery. If we don't act now, both mother and child are at risk." Emily's chest heaved. Terror gripped her lungs like a vice. She could feel her body betraying her, contracting too soon, too violently. She thought of Andrew, his shove, his sneer, his cold words. Rage flickered through the pain, a surge of determination not to let his cruelty steal the one thing she still had. The doctor leaned over her. "Emily, I need you to push when I tell you. Do you understand?" Tears streamed down her face. "I'm scared." Ethan's grip tightened around hers, his thumb brushing against her damp skin. "Then borrow my courage," he whispered fiercely. "I'll carry it for both of you." The next contraction tore through her, and Emily screamed, her body arching against the bed. The sound was raw, primal, echoing down the sterile hallways. Nurses pressed on her abdomen, guiding her strength, while the doctor urged, "Push, Emily, now!" She pushed with every ounce of strength left in her, her vision blurred with tears, the room spinning, but she refused to stop. Each cry, each heave was a battle between despair and hope. Suddenly, the shrill cry of an infant pierced the room. It was thin, weak, but it was life. Emily collapsed back against the bed, sobbing with relief. Her arms trembled as the nurse placed the tiny bundle on her chest. The baby's skin was mottled, his breath shallow, but his tiny fingers curled around her gown as if clinging to her with the same desperation she had clung to Ethan. Emily's tears soaked the newborn's soft hair. "My baby, my beautiful boy." Ethan's eyes glistened as he leaned down, brushing a tender kiss against Emily's temple. He gazed at the fragile child, awe softening every line of his usually composed face. "He's here. You both made it." The doctor, still stern, cautioned, "The baby will need intensive care. He's early and fragile. We'll move him to the neonatal unit immediately." Emily's heart clenched as the nurse carefully lifted the infant from her chest. "Take care of him," she whispered, her voice cracking. Ethan squeezed her hand, his eyes locked on hers. "I'll make sure he gets everything he needs. You're not alone anymore, Emily. Not for a single moment." And as her son was wheeled away, Emily closed her eyes, clinging to Ethan's words like a lifeline, unaware that outside those walls, the world was already turning against Andrew Carter. While Emily clung to life and her fragile newborn in the hospital, another storm was erupting in the digital world. The shove at the airport had not gone unnoticed. Dozens of witnesses had recorded it, their phones capturing every shocking detail. The pregnant woman's desperate plea, the brutal push, the blood on her hands, and the cold indifference on Andrew Carter's face. By midnight, the first video hit social media. Within minutes, hashtags exploded: airport betrayal, pregnant wife pushed, Andrew Carter exposed. The grainy clip played on loop, showing Andrew turning away with Vanessa on his arm while Emily crumpled to the ground. The sight ignited collective outrage. "Is this man human?" one comment blazed. "She's carrying his child and he just throws her away like trash. This monster has a mistress and no soul." News outlets picked it up within the hour. By dawn, Emily's name was trending nationwide. The headlines were merciless. Corporate climber shoves pregnant wife in storm. Mistress watches. Talk shows replayed the clip, anchors shaking their heads in disgust. In the boardrooms Andrew once dominated, whispers turned to alarm. Investors who once praised his ruthless drive now questioned his judgment. "If he treats his own wife like that," one executive muttered on a leaked call, "what does he do to his employees, to us?" Meanwhile, Vanessa scrolled through the storm of fury with trembling fingers. Her glamorous photos with Andrew, once flooded with compliments, now drowned in venom. Homewrecker. Disgrace. Get out while you can. Her stomach twisted as she realized the world wasn't just condemning Andrew, it was dragging her down with him. Andrew, however, refused to see the walls closing in. Sitting in his office the next morning, he slammed the newspaper onto his desk. The front page screamed his downfall. "Businessman pushes pregnant wife at airport. Caught on camera." "This is garbage," he growled, pacing like a caged animal. "A bad headline will blow over." Vanessa, pale and shaken, didn't answer. She knew better. The public wasn't just angry, it was enraged. And once rage caught fire online, there was no extinguishing it. In contrast, the hospital where Emily lay recovering was flooded with flowers, cards, and messages of support. Strangers who had never heard her name before now called her a symbol of resilience. "Stay strong, Emily," one note read. "The world is on your side." Ethan Blackwell watched it all unfold from a discreet distance. He sat by Emily's bedside, his phone buzzing with updates from his media team. "The story is everywhere," his assistant whispered. Ethan glanced at Emily, her face pale against the pillow, her newborn son fighting for every breath in the neonatal ward. "This isn't just a scandal, Ethan said quietly. This is a reckoning. And he was right. Sponsors began pulling out of Andrew's ventures. A luxury brand released a statement. We do not associate with men who harm women. Shareholders demanded emergency meetings. His empire, once built on charm and manipulation, trembled under the weight of public fury. And while Andrew screamed at his collapsing world, Emily, unaware, held on to her fragile son, destined to rise from the ashes of the betrayal that nearly destroyed her. The days after the storm blurred into a haze of pain and quiet resilience. Emily lay in the hospital bed, her body weak, stitched with exhaustion from a battle she never thought she'd fight so soon. Each morning, she woke to the antiseptic sting of the ward, the rhythmic beeping of monitors, and the hollow ache of absence when her newborn was taken to the neonatal unit for observation. Every movement sent ripples of soreness through her frame. Yet every time she heard the faint cries of babies in nearby rooms, her heart clenched with determination. She whispered to herself, "Hold on for him. Be strong for him." Ethan Blackwell never left her side. He wasn't family, yet the staff treated him as though he were her guardian. His presence was constant. A quiet chair pulled close to her bed, fresh flowers arriving daily, hot meals replaced untouched when she was too weak to eat. His schedule as a billionaire CEO, once measured by deals and conferences, bent entirely around Emily's recovery. One evening, as rain tapped gently against the window, Ethan sat reading reports on his tablet while Emily stirred awake. Her voice was fragile, breaking the silence. "Why are you still here?" He set the tablet aside immediately. "Because you shouldn't be alone. Not now, not after everything you've endured." Her eyes welled with tears she tried to suppress. "I don't understand. Andrew, he should have been here. He should have been the one to hold my hand." Ethan's gaze hardened, though his tone remained gentle. "Andrew made his choice, and now you have to make yours. You can either drown in the pain he gave you, or you can fight to rise above it. For yourself, for your child." Emily turned her face toward the ceiling, silent tears rolling down her cheeks. "I'm scared, Ethan. I don't know how to do this alone." "You won't be alone," he said firmly, leaning closer. "I'll make sure of it." The following afternoon, a nurse wheeled Emily into the neonatal ward. She wore a pale blue gown, her hair brushed back by trembling fingers. Her son lay inside an incubator, tubes and wires attached to his tiny body. Emily pressed her hand to the glass, her lips quivering. "He looks so fragile," she whispered. Ethan stood beside her, his hand hovering just above her shoulder, respectful yet protective. "Fragile doesn't mean weak," he said softly. "He's a fighter, just like his mother." The nurse smiled kindly. "He's improving every day. He'll grow stronger because you're here." For the first time in days, a faint smile touched Emily's lips. She whispered through the glass, "Mommy's here, little one. Mommy's not leaving you." That night, as she returned to her bed, Emily felt a flicker of hope pierce through the fog of despair. Ethan caught that glimmer in her eyes and felt something shift inside him. And while Emily began the long road to healing, Ethan silently vowed that Andrew Carter would never again have the power to break her or her child. The morning after the scandal broke, Andrew Carter stormed into his office, convinced he could crush the flames with sheer arrogance. The glass tower that bore his name had always been his fortress, a place where deals were struck and rivals silenced. But today, the air felt different. Assistants avoided his eyes, phones rang unanswered, and whispers trailed in his wake like smoke from a dying fire. He slammed his briefcase onto the mahogany desk, his reflection staring back from the glossy surface. His phone buzzed with call after call, board members, investors, even old allies demanding explanations. He ignored them all. Instead, he poured himself a whiskey, though it was barely 10 in the morning. Vanessa entered quietly, sunglasses shielding her face even indoors. She tossed a folded newspaper onto his desk. The headlines screamed in bold letters, "Corporate Shark Pushes Pregnant Wife, Caught on Camera." Beneath it, the photo, Andrew sneering, Emily crumpled on the ground, rain streaking her face like tears. "They're calling you a monster," Vanessa said flatly. Andrew scoffed, though his grip on the glass tightened. "People love outrage. It'll blow over in a week." But as if to mock him, his office phone rang. He snatched it up. "This is Carter." The voice on the other end was cold, measured. "This is the chairman. We're calling an emergency board meeting. Effective immediately, you're suspended from your position pending investigation. Andrew's jaw clenched. You can't do that. This company is mine. Not anymore, the chairman replied. You've become a liability. Investors are pulling out. We can't risk being tied to your scandal. The line went dead. He hurled the phone across the room, shattering it against the wall. Vanessa flinched, removing her sunglasses. For the first time, she looked uncertain. Andrew, this is bad. Brands are severing ties. The public hates you. Even my modeling contracts are being canceled because of you. He turned on her, his voice dripping venom. So now you're worried about your career? Don't forget who pulled you into this world. Without me, you'd still be serving drinks at industry parties. Her lips curled into a sneer. And without me, you'd still be chained to that boring little wife, pretending you cared about family. The words cut deeper than she intended. For the first time, Andrew's confidence faltered. He remembered Emily's face at the airport, pale, desperate, full of betrayal. The image haunted him, though he shoved it aside with another gulp of whiskey. By midday, the damage multiplied. Social media campaigns called for boycotts. A luxury car brand released a statement, "We sever all sponsorship with Andrew Carter, effective immediately." His inbox flooded with rejections, cancellations, and threats of lawsuits. He staggered to the window, staring down at the city that once bowed to him. The streets swarmed with people who had already judged him, condemned him. His empire was crumbling, not with the crash of thunder, but with the steady, merciless pull of public outrage. Vanessa stood behind him, arms folded, her silence louder than any accusation. And for the first time, Andrew Carter realized the world was no longer his to command. It was slipping into the hands of the very woman he tried to destroy. The neonatal intensive care unit glowed with soft blue lights, machines humming in a fragile symphony of survival. Tiny bodies fought colossal battles inside transparent incubators, each breath measured by blinking monitors and cautious nurses. Among them lay Emily's son, swaddled in wires and tubes, his chest rising and falling with delicate determination. Emily pressed her forehead to the glass, her palms trembling as she whispered, "My brave little fighter." Her eyes traced every fragile detail, his impossibly small fingers, his tiny lips pursed in silent effort. She had carried him for 6 months, dreamed of lullabies and nursery walls, never imagining their first days together would be a war for air. A nurse stepped beside her. "He's stable for now," the woman said softly. "Every hour he holds on is a victory. Don't lose hope." Emily nodded, though her throat ached from holding back sobs. "Can I touch him?" she asked timidly. The nurse smiled gently. "Through the port, yes, just one finger. It helps babies feel safe." Emily slid her hand through the small opening and brushed the tip of her finger against her son's hand. To her astonishment, his minuscule fingers curled instinctively around hers. A sob broke free from her chest. "You know me," she whispered. "You know Mommy's here." Behind her, Ethan stood in silence, his tall frame somehow humbled by the sight. He had negotiated billion-dollar deals, commanded boardrooms filled with titans, yet nothing had ever gripped him the way this scene did. A fragile child clinging to life, and a mother pouring her soul into a single touch. Emily turned slightly, her eyes shimmering. "What if I can't do this, Ethan? What if I'm not enough?" He moved closer, his voice steady, almost reverent. "Emily, you've already given him everything. Your strength, your fight, your love. That's more than enough. And you won't do this alone, not while I'm here." She looked back at her son, her tears falling freely. For the first time since the airport, the crushing weight of abandonment eased. Where Andrew had pushed her into despair, Ethan was holding her together with unwavering devotion. Hours slipped by. Emily refused to leave her baby's side, singing softly through the glass, telling him stories of the life waiting for him beyond the machines. Ethan brought her food, blankets, anything to keep her strength up. He never pressed her, never intruded, just stayed, a quiet fortress of support. When the doctor finally entered, his expression was serious but not without hope. "Your son is fragile, but he's fighting harder than most preemies. With care, he has a real chance." Emily clasped her hands, whispering a prayer of gratitude. She turned to Ethan, her voice quivering. "I don't deserve all this help from you." Ethan's gaze was unwavering. "You deserve far more than you've ever been given. And one day, Emily, you'll believe that too." Her heart clenched, torn between the scars of betrayal and the strange new warmth stirring inside her. She glanced once more at her son, his tiny fingers twitching around her own. And in that sterile, glowing room, Emily made a vow. No matter the storms outside, she and her son would rise, and no man would ever break them again. Andrew Carter had built his career on the art of persuasion. When problems arose, he didn't solve them. He spun them. Lies became half-truths became stories, and stories became reputations polished enough to fool investors. So when the scandal exploded online, Andrew fell back on the one skill he trusted more than anything: manipulation. His penthouse had been transformed into a makeshift war room. Publicists huddled over laptops, phones buzzed with incoming calls, and half-empty wine glasses littered the marble counter. Andrew paced like a caged predator, his shirt untucked, his eyes bloodshot from sleepless fury. "We control the narrative," he barked, slamming his palm against the table. "We frame Emily as unstable, overwhelmed by pregnancy hormones. The footage doesn't show the full story. People are gullible. They'll believe what we tell them." One PR consultant hesitated. "Sir, the footage is clear. You shoved a visibly pregnant woman. No amount of spin will erase that image." Andrew's glare could have cut glass. "Then we paint her as manipulative. Say she staged it. Women cry, people believe them. It's an old trick. But now we say she wanted sympathy. That billionaire, what's his name? Blackwell? He's her accomplice. She planned this to humiliate me." The room fell into uneasy silence. Even Vanessa, usually smug at his side, shifted uncomfortably. "Andrew, that sounds desperate. People aren't blind. They saw you push her." He rounded on her, his voice sharp as a whip. "And what, Vanessa? You think they'll take your word over mine? You're in this as deep as I am. Don't forget whose arm you were clinging to in that video." Her cheeks flushed with anger, but she bit her tongue. She knew better than to provoke him when his temper flared. One consultant finally spoke, voice trembling. "We could lean into remorse, issue an apology, say you lost your temper, that you regret it." Andrew cut him off with a bitter laugh. "Apologize? To her? To the woman who shackled me with a baby I never wanted? No, I don't beg, I don't crawl, I win." But even as he spat the words, his phone buzzed with another alert. Another sponsor pulls out. Stock prices plunging. His empire, once untouchable, was unraveling with every passing hour. Vanessa lit a cigarette, exhaling a curl of smoke toward the ceiling. "Maybe you should think about how far you're willing to fall, Andrew. Because right now, the world doesn't see a winner. They see a monster." Her words stung, but he shoved the thought aside, clinging to his delusion. "I built everything from nothing. I can rebuild. I'll crush Emily and that billionaire. No one humiliates me," and walks away unscathed. But outside the penthouse walls, the tide had already turned. Emily's story had become a rallying cry, and Ethan Blackwell's silent support only amplified it. And while Andrew plotted in arrogance, the truth was spreading faster than any lie he could invent. Preparing to deliver a blow his silver tongue could never undo. The first time Emily saw her name on the news, she felt exposed, as though the entire world had been invited into her most private humiliation. Lying in her hospital bed, she trembled when the nurse switched on the television. Her face filled the screen, rain-soaked, tear-streaked, clutching her belly as Andrew turned his back. The caption read, "Pregnant wife abandoned. America demands justice." At first, shame burned through her. She wanted to hide, to pull the blanket over her head and vanish. But then the segment changed. Footage of strangers holding candles, gathering outside the hospital, filled the screen. People she had never met carried signs that read, "Stand with Emily and no more silence." Her lips parted in disbelief. "They're here? For me?" The nurse smiled gently. "Not just here. All over the country. You're not alone anymore." Messages poured in. Cards stacked on her bedside table, flowers filled the corners of her room, and letters arrived daily. Some were from women who had lived through betrayal. Others came from fathers promising to raise their sons better. One note, scrawled in a child's handwriting, read, "Stay strong, Emily. My mom says you're a hero." Each word fed something inside her that Andrew had tried to starve, her sense of worth. For months, she had felt invisible, dismissed as nothing more than an inconvenience. Now, voices she had never known lifted her higher than she ever thought she could stand. One evening, Ethan found her reading through a pile of letters, tears streaking her cheeks. "Why are they doing this?" she whispered. "They don't even know me." He crouched beside her, his hand resting gently on hers. "They see your courage, Emily. You fought through cruelty, humiliation, and pain, and you still stood up. That's what people are responding to. You're not just one woman's story, you've become every woman's fight." Her heart swelled with a mixture of disbelief and gratitude. "I'm not strong, Ethan. I'm just surviving." His gaze softened, unwavering. Survival is strength, and now the world knows it too. The following day, the hospital staff wheeled her to the NICU. When she entered, a quiet cheer rose from families gathered in the ward. Parents nodded to her with tears in their eyes, whispering encouragement. One mother with tired eyes clasped Emily's hand and said, "Because of you, I have the courage to leave my abusive husband. Thank you." Emily's breath caught. For the first time, she realized her suffering had created ripples beyond herself. She wasn't just fighting for her baby anymore. She was part of something larger, a wave of change. That night, as she sat by her son's incubator, she whispered a vow. "You'll grow up in a world where women don't stay silent. I'll make sure of it." Ethan watched her, pride flickering in his eyes. He saw not the broken woman from the airport, but the beginnings of a leader. Someone whose scars would shine brighter than Andrew's hollow triumphs ever could. And as Emily kissed the glass of the incubator, the woman Andrew tried to erase was being reborn, stronger, braver, and no longer afraid. By the end of the week, Andrew Carter's empire, once a gleaming tower of glass and steel, was cracking under the weight of his scandal. What he had spent years building with manipulation and ruthless ambition was now unraveling in real time, streamed live on every major network. Shareholders convened an emergency meeting, their faces grim and voices sharp. One after another, they demanded his resignation. "You've destroyed the brand," one board member spat across the polished table. "Our stock has plummeted 30% in 3 days. Every sponsor has abandoned us. You've become toxic." Andrew, sweating through his tailored suit, slammed his fist on the table. "This company exists because of me. Without me, you'd all still be nobodies. You can't strip me of what I created." But his arrogance only fueled their fury. Another member slid a document across the table, an official vote of no confidence. Cameras flashed outside the boardroom as security escorted him out, his protests echoing uselessly down the marble hallways. By that afternoon, news outlets erupted with the story. Andrew Carter removed as CEO. Company distances itself from scandal. Anchors recounted every detail of the viral video, juxtaposed with footage of Emily recovering in the hospital. The contrast between Andrew's cruelty and Emily's quiet resilience painted him as a villain in high definition. Vanessa tried to stand by him, but the glamour quickly soured. Paparazzi hounded her with vicious questions. "How does it feel to destroy a family? Are you proud of standing beside a man who abandoned his pregnant wife?" Contracts vanished overnight, brands severing ties with her as swiftly as they had with him. Her once coveted modeling career collapsed like glass shattering on marble. At home, Andrew drowned his rage in liquor, watching his empire slip through his fingers. Every news channel replayed his downfall. Clips of him shoving Emily at the airport were slowed, zoomed, analyzed by body language experts who called it premeditated aggression. Talk show hosts mocked him. Protesters gathered outside his penthouse chanting, "Justice for Emily." He hurled a glass at the screen, shattering it in a spray of whiskey and shards. "She ruined me," he snarled, pacing like a beast in a cage. "That woman turned the whole world against me." But even in his fury, he knew it wasn't just Emily. It was Ethan Blackwell. The billionaire's silent declaration claiming Emily as his wife on the runway had tipped the scales. Andrew saw it now. He wasn't just fighting a betrayed woman. He was fighting a man with limitless resources, a man the public adored, a man who had already stepped into the role Andrew had thrown away. The irony burned him alive. While Emily lay fragile but surrounded by love, Andrew stood isolated in the ruins of his kingdom. The man who had once boasted of being untouchable was now the most despised name in the city. And as the storm outside his windows mirrored the chaos in his soul, Andrew realized his fall had only just begun. The worst was yet to come. The neonatal unit became a second home for Ethan Blackwell. Each morning, he arrived in a tailored suit but left his boardroom persona at the door. He slipped into the hospital like any ordinary man, carrying coffee for the nurses and fresh flowers for Emily. To the world, he was a billionaire. To her, in those fragile days, he was simply the man who showed up when no one else did. Emily's son, tiny, fragile, yet stubbornly alive, was slowly gaining strength. Every day his cries grew louder, his breath steadier. Emily sat for hours by the incubator, whispering lullabies and stories about the life she hoped to give him. Ethan often stood behind her, quiet, hands in his pockets, watching the bond between mother and child unfold like a miracle. One evening, Emily turned to him with exhaustion in her eyes. "You don't have to stay, Ethan. You have a company to run, a life to live. I don't want to be your burden." His answer came without hesitation. "Emily, you're not a burden. You never could be. You and your son, you're the only part of my life right now that feels real." Her lips parted, stunned by the sincerity in his voice. No one had ever spoken to her that way, not even Andrew in their happiest days. Later that night, a nurse encouraged Emily to try skin-to-skin contact with her baby. Nervously, she cradled the tiny bundle against her chest. Tears filled her eyes as she felt the faint rhythm of his heart against hers. "He knows me," she whispered. Ethan stepped closer, his eyes softening. "Of course he does. He knows his mother is the bravest woman alive." Emily looked up at him, her cheeks flushed with emotion. Would you like to hold him?" Ethan froze, startled by the offer. He had signed billion-dollar contracts without blinking. But this made his hands tremble. The nurse carefully guided the baby into his arms. Ethan held the fragile child as though cradling the most precious treasure on earth. The baby stirred, letting out a soft whimper, and then nestled into his chest. Ethan's throat tightened. "He's perfect." Emily watched, her heart swelling at the sight. For the first time in weeks, warmth replaced the hollow ache inside her. The image of Ethan holding her son etched itself into her soul, an image she never expected to want, but now couldn't forget. That night, as she settled back into bed, Ethan remained at her side. He read aloud from one of the books she loved, his deep voice filling the quiet room. Emily drifted off to sleep with her baby safe in the NICU, and Ethan's steady presence beside her. And though neither of them spoke it aloud, something unspoken had begun to grow. A bond forged not from wealth or power, but from love, trust, and the fragile miracle of a child who had survived the storm. Vanessa Hill had always believed she was clever enough to ride the wave of Andrew Carter's success. He promised her luxury, influence, and a seat beside him at the table of power. But now, instead of champagne galas, she was trapped inside his penthouse, curtains drawn to block out flashing cameras and protesters chanting Emily's name on the street below. The glamour had rotted into disgrace. Her modeling contracts had been terminated overnight, designers pulled their gowns from her closet, and every invitation that once bore her name vanished, as if she had never existed. The world wasn't dazzled by Andrew anymore, and by extension, it despised her too. She sat at the edge of the bed, scrolling through her phone, her feed flooded with venom. "Homewrecker. Shame on you." You stood there laughing while he shoved his wife. Each comment cut deeper, the adoration she once enjoyed replaced by rage. Andrew stormed into the room half-drunk, tie hanging loose around his neck. "They're turning on me," he barked. "The board betrayed me, the press crucified me, but I'll claw my way back. They'll regret ever crossing Andrew Carter." Vanessa looked up, her patience fraying. "Andrew, wake up. You're finished. Every brand, every investor, every so-called friend has left you. You can't spin your way out of this." His eyes narrowed. "So what, you're giving up on me too?" She stood, her voice sharp. "I gave up everything for you. My career, my reputation, gone. And for what? To watch you destroy yourself? To stand by while the world sees me as a villain?" He sneered, stepping closer. "Don't act like you're innocent. You loved the attention. You loved being paraded around like a trophy." Her temper snapped. "At least I didn't push a pregnant woman into the ground. That's on you, Andrew. Not me. And now everyone knows what kind of monster you really are." His face darkened, rage flickering like a dangerous flame. "Careful, Vanessa. Don't forget who made you." She met his glare with defiance she had never dared before. "No, Andrew, you didn't make me. You ruined me. And I won't go down with you." For the first time, silence hung heavy between them. Andrew's bluster faltered, the truth in her words cutting deeper than any insult. He realized too late that Vanessa's loyalty, fragile as glass, had finally shattered. That night, Vanessa packed her bags. As cameras flashed outside, she slipped into a waiting car, her head held high. By morning, tabloids screamed with new headlines. Mistress abandons disgraced CEO. Vanessa Hill speaks out. Her statement was short but devastating. I was blinded by ambition and seduced by lies. I regret my part in Andrew Carter's downfall. My sympathy is with Emily and her child. Andrew read it alone in the darkened penthouse, his empire gone, his mistress turned enemy, and his name cursed across every screen. And while Emily healed in the quiet strength of love, Andrew realized the final betrayal had come. Not from strangers, but from the woman he thought would never leave. 2 weeks after the storm at the airport, Emily Carter stepped into the light again. The hospital had urged her to remain private, to recover quietly, but the world clamored for her story. Outside the glass doors, cameras clustered like vultures, their flashes exploding against the night. Yet when Emily emerged, holding her newborn son in her arms, the crowd hushed into reverent silence. She wore a simple cream dress, her hair pulled back, no jewels, no glamour, just a mother, fragile but unbroken. Ethan walked beside her, his tall frame shielding her from the chaos, but it was Emily the cameras couldn't turn away from. She wasn't the sobbing woman from the viral video anymore. She was something stronger, steadier. Reporters shouted questions. Emily, how are you feeling? Do you have anything to say to Andrew Carter? Who is the man supporting you? Emily paused at the microphone the hospital had reluctantly set up. Her hands shook as she adjusted the blanket over her son. But when she spoke, her voice carried with unexpected strength. I didn't choose to be in this position, she began softly, but I choose to speak now. What happened at the airport wasn't just about me. It was about every woman who's been silenced, every mother who's been discarded, every voice that's been told it doesn't matter. The crowd leaned in, spellbound. I survived that night because of my child, she continued, glancing down at the tiny face nestled against her. Because even when I thought my life was over, I knew his was just beginning, and I will spend every breath making sure he grows up in a world where women are respected, not broken. Her words pierced through the flashing lights, carried live to millions watching on television. Hashtags exploded anew. Emily speaks. Rise from the storm. Ethan placed a steady hand on her shoulder, silent but resolute. His presence was no longer a mystery. The cameras recognized him instantly. Tech billionaire stands beside Emily Carter, headlines blared. Yet Emily didn't lean on him for attention. His role was clear. He wasn't the story. She was. When a reporter pressed, "Do you forgive Andrew?" Emily's eyes flickered with pain but also resolve. "Forgiveness is not mine to grant," she answered. "Accountability is his to face. What I know is this: I am no longer his wife in spirit, only on paper. And soon, not even that." The crowd erupted into cheers, applause, breaking through the storm of flashes. Emily clutched her son tighter, her heart pounding. For the first time, she wasn't just surviving, she was leading. That night, news anchors replayed her speech with awe. Commentators called it the moment the victim became the voice of millions. Donations poured into women's shelters in her name. Letters of gratitude flooded the hospital, and Emily Carter transformed from a face of tragedy into a symbol of resilience. And as Andrew raged at her defiance, Emily walked back into the hospital with Ethan at her side, unaware that her journey had only just begun, and that her next step would change everything. Andrew Carter sat alone in the dim light of his penthouse, the city's skyline stretching before him like a cruel reminder of everything he had lost. Once, he had looked at those glittering towers and seen conquest. Now they mocked him. His phone buzzed endlessly with debt collectors, angry investors, and former allies demanding their money back. Each call reminded him of the empire slipping through his fingers. Bottles littered the coffee table, their amber contents long drained. Andrew's tie hung from a chair, his shirt unbuttoned, his once perfect image unraveling as fast as his reputation. He had not shaved in days. His eyes were bloodshot, haunted by sleepless nights and the echo of Emily's speech replaying across every network. He hurled a glass against the wall, shards scattering like his pride. "She thinks she's stronger than me? She thinks she can humiliate me?" His voice rasped, broken by rage. Vanessa's betrayal still burned. Her public statement condemning him had cut deeper than any knife. He had lost his company, his mistress, and his public image in the span of days. All he had left was bitterness. Scrolling through his phone, he saw Emily's face on every headline. Emily Carter speaks out, nation rallies behind her. Her simple words had dismantled the fortress of lies he had built for years. And beside her in every photo stood Ethan Blackwell. The billionaire Andrew had once hoped to charm as a business ally. The sight of Ethan's steady hand on Emily's shoulder ignited a fury Andrew could not contain. She was mine, he whispered bitterly. Mine to keep, mine to break, mine to control. And now she parades around like some hero? He stumbled to his desk, pulling open drawers and scattering papers. Hidden beneath contracts and unpaid bills was a revolver, polished and cold. He stared at it, the weight of desperation pulling him deeper into darkness. If the world won't give me respect, he muttered, I'll take it back. But even in his spiral, a flicker of fear crawled through him. He wasn't just hated, he was irrelevant. Investors had moved on, the media had crowned Emily a survivor, and Ethan's presence ensured she would never need Andrew again. For a man whose life had been built on control, irrelevance was worse than ruin. He collapsed into the chair, clutching his head. Memories of Emily's laugh, her hand on his arm in their early days, haunted him. For a fleeting second, regret pierced his arrogance, but it was too late. The man she had loved no longer existed. He had been swallowed by greed long ago. Outside, thunder cracked across the sky, lightning illuminating his reflection in the window. He barely recognized the hollow eyes staring back. And as Andrew sank deeper into despair, muttering plans of revenge, he didn't realize that forces far greater than his rage were aligning. Forces that would ensure his downfall was permanent, and Emily's rise unstoppable. The ballroom shimmered beneath chandeliers that dripped with light like liquid gold. It was the annual Blackwell Foundation Gala, an event where the city's elite gathered in gowns and tuxedos, their laughter mingling with the soft strains of a string quartet. Yet that night, no one's eyes lingered on the glittering decor or the champagne towers. All attention shifted to the entrance, where Emily Carter appeared on Ethan Blackwell's arm. She wore a flowing sapphire gown that moved like water around her frame. A delicate diamond necklace caught the light with every step, but it wasn't the jewels or the dress that held the crowd captive. It was Emily herself. No longer the trembling woman from the viral video, she walked with poise, her head held high, her son safely at home under the care of trusted nurses. She looked every bit the survivor who had transformed her pain into undeniable strength. Ethan, resplendent in a black tuxedo, kept his hand at the small of her back. Not possessive, but protective, proud. He guided her through the sea of whispers and flashing cameras, their presence together a statement that needed no words. Reporters clamored at the velvet ropes. Emily, how does it feel to be here tonight? She paused briefly, her smile calm, measured. It feels like a beginning, she replied. Inside, applause erupted as they entered the grand hall. Influential figures rose from their seats, not for Ethan, but for her. Emily's story had captured hearts across the nation, and tonight she stood not as a victim, but as a symbol of resilience. At the podium, Ethan spoke first, thanking guests for supporting the foundation's work in women's shelters and neonatal care. Then, to everyone's astonishment, he turned to Emily. There's someone here tonight who embodies what true strength looks like, he said, his voice carrying through the hushed hall. Her courage has inspired not only me, but millions. Emily Carter, would you join me? Gasps rippled through the audience as Emily ascended the stage. Her hands trembled, but Ethan's reassuring nod steadied her. She looked out at the sea of faces, powerful men and women, journalists, celebrities, all waiting. Her voice, soft yet resolute, filled the room. 2 weeks ago, I was left broken on a runway, discarded by the person I thought would protect me most. But that night, I realized something important. Strength doesn't come from those who abandon us. It comes from rising after we fall. The crowd leaned forward, hanging on her words. I stand here tonight not just for myself, but for every woman who has been silenced, every child who deserves a safe beginning, every family torn apart by cruelty. We are not weak. We are not invisible. We are worthy. The hall erupted into thunderous applause, many on their feet, with tears in their eyes. Ethan stepped forward, his gaze fixed on her with unmistakable admiration. And as Emily descended the stage to a standing ovation, she felt it. This was the moment her story shifted from tragedy to triumph, and Andrew Carter's shadow was gone forever. The night of the gala had barely ended when news of Andrew Carter's last desperate move hit the city. He had stormed into the press with a wild statement, accusing Emily and Ethan of conspiring to destroy him. His rants, slurred with alcohol and bitterness, were broadcast live, and within hours, the world laughed at his collapse. Once a feared corporate giant, Andrew now looked like a man unraveling in public, clinging to lies no one believed. The final blow came swiftly. Federal investigators opened inquiries into his fraudulent business deals, uncovering years of hidden embezzlement. His assets were frozen, his penthouse seized, and his so-called allies abandoned him. Vanessa's testimony, once his shield, became a dagger. She revealed his threats, his cruelty, and his manipulation to the authorities. The man who once boasted that no one could touch him was now cornered, stripped of power, money, and pride. Meanwhile, Emily's world was changing in ways she had never imagined. With Ethan's support, she moved from the hospital into a serene home overlooking the water. Her son, though fragile, was thriving, his tiny cries now strong enough to fill her nights with music instead of fear. She decorated his nursery with soft blues and whites, each detail a promise of the life she would give him. Ethan was there for every step. He wasn't just the billionaire at her side. He was the man rocking her child at midnight, the man who listened to her fears without judgment, the man who reminded her daily that she was not alone. Slowly, Emily's heart healed, not because Ethan rescued her, but because he respected her strength enough to let her stand tall on her own. One quiet evening, as the sun dipped low and painted the sky in shades of fire and gold, Ethan took Emily's hand. Her son slept peacefully in the crib beside them. "Emily," he said softly, his voice uncharacteristically hesitant. "I never believed in fate, not until the night I saw you standing in that storm. You don't owe me anything, but if you'll allow it, I want to spend my life proving that you and your son are everything I've ever needed." Tears filled her eyes, not from pain this time, but from joy she had thought she'd never feel again. She reached for his hand, squeezing it firmly. "You already have, Ethan. You've given me something I thought was gone forever. Hope." The news of Andrew's sentencing broke weeks later. Prison time for fraud, bankruptcy filed, his name reduced to ash in the industry he once ruled. He was left alone, forgotten, a cautionary tale of greed and cruelty. Emily, by contrast, stood in the light. At a press conference for the Blackwell Foundation, she spoke once more, her baby in her arms and Ethan by her side. "This isn't the end of my story," she said, smiling through tears. "It's the beginning, and no storm can take this away from us." The crowd erupted into applause, their cheers echoing through the hall. And as Emily kissed her son's forehead, with Ethan's arms steady around her, she knew she had finally found what she deserved. Not just survival, but love, dignity, and a future brighter than she had ever dreamed.